Hey guys, I know. I'm just an old man telling a scary story. But come on, you gotta help me out here. Make sure to hit that subscribe button before we dive into this creepy tale, alright? Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. So, get comfy, maybe grab a blanket, and let's have some fun. Now let's get into it. Let me tell you about the creepiest experience my friend Tom had. It's one of those stories where you just know something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Tom's always been a pretty chill guy, not easily scared, but what happened to him at this old cabin left him shaken for weeks. So, Tom had been feeling pretty burnt out from work and thought a quiet weekend away would help. He found this secluded cabin rental online with amazing reviews. People kept raving about how peaceful it was. Perfect for disconnecting from the world, they said. It sounded ideal, so he booked it, packed a bag with just the basics, and headed up into the mountains for a solo trip. The cabin itself was about an hour off the main road, surrounded by nothing but thick forest. There wasn't another house or person in sight. It was just a small wooden cabin with a porch, a cozy living room, a bedroom, and a little kitchen. The kind of place where you could really get away from everything, you know? The first day went by smoothly. Tom unpacked, made himself some coffee, and spent the afternoon just walking around the property, taking in the fresh air and the stillness. It was actually really nice. There was no cell service, but that was kind of the point. He felt like he could finally just unplug and be in the moment. As night fell, he lit a fire in the fireplace and settled in with a book, but kept getting distracted by the complete silence. No car engines, no people, just the occasional crackling of the fire. Around 3 a.m., he was still awake, just sitting on the porch, staring up at the stars. That's when he heard a knocking sound. It was faint at first, almost like the wood settling. He brushed it off as nothing, but then it happened again. Thud, thud, thud. This time, it sounded like it came from right underneath the porch, as if someone or something was knocking on the floorboards from below. He grabbed a flashlight and shined it through the gaps in the porch. The light bounced off the dirt below, casting long shadows from the beams, but nothing seemed out of place. There were no animals scurrying away, no sign of any disturbance at all. He told himself it was just his imagination and went back inside, but before he could lock the door, there was another sound. It wasn't a knock this time. It was a soft scraping, like something was dragging along the wooden boards. Tom checked all the doors and windows to make sure everything was locked and then went to bed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. His sleep was restless, filled with unsettling dreams he could barely remember. The next morning, he felt a bit better and decided to take a hike along a trail behind the cabin. As he walked deeper into the woods, that uneasy feeling from the night before started creeping back. He could swear he was hearing footsteps that would stop whenever he did. He'd turn around, and there'd be nothing there. A couple of times he thought he saw a flicker of movement between the trees, but every time he tried to focus on it, it would vanish, like a mirage. About an hour into the hike, he came across something strange. An old, run-down shack that wasn't on any of the maps. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The wood was gray and warped, the roof sagging in the middle. Curious, Tom approached it and peeked through one of the grimy windows. Inside, there were broken pieces of furniture, scattered papers, and drawings. Hundreds of them. The drawings covered almost every inch of the walls, and they all had one thing in common. They were of a figure standing at the edge of a forest, just like the one surrounding the cabin. The figure was always drawn in different poses, sometimes waving, sometimes standing still. The more Tom looked at them, the more uneasy he felt. It was as if the figure was staring back at him from each picture. Deciding he'd seen enough, Tom headed back to the cabin. But as he walked, he kept feeling like he was being watched. Every time he looked back, there was nothing but trees swaying gently in the breeze. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was hiding just out of sight. That night, as he was lying in bed, almost drifting off to sleep, he heard it again. a voice, low and whispery, coming from outside the window. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but the more he listened, the more he was certain it was a voice. It was mumbling something, but the words weren't clear, almost like they were being spoken in reverse or in a language he didn't know. He slowly got out of bed, his heart pounding, and crept to the window. He pulled back the curtain just an inch, enough to peek outside. There, standing in the middle of the yard, was the same figure from the drawings, pale, with unnaturally long limbs and a face that seemed off, like it didn't quite belong to a human. Its eyes were dark and hollow, and it was just standing there, staring up at the cabin, as if it had been waiting for him. Tom dropped the curtain and backed away, feeling his throat tighten in fear. He wanted to run, but he was frozen, unable to move. Then he heard a knock on the window. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Thud, thud, thud. It was louder than before, like the figure was right on the other side of the glass. Without looking back, Tom grabbed his keys, ran to his car, and sped off down the dirt road, not even bothering to pack his things. He drove through the night, not stopping until he was miles away from that cabin. When he finally got home, he tried to find the cabin listing online so he could leave a review to warn other people. But the listing was gone, wiped from the site completely. There was no record of the cabin, no history, no contact info for the owner, nothing. It was like the place had never existed at all. Tom never found out who or what was standing outside that night. He doesn't talk about it much, but when he does, he says he's sure of one thing. Whatever it was, it wanted him to see it. And it's probably still out there, waiting.